Hard Reset is the first game from new developer Flying Wild Hog, a collection of people who have worked on such projects as Painkiller, Bulletstorm, and the Witcher series. The idea of Hard Reset is kind of stated in the game's title. In a world where the first-person shooter genre has become wrought with numerous games that feature scripted events and lavish set pieces, the hope is to effectively do a hard reset of sorts and deliver a throwback experience akin to that of Serious Sam or the aforementioned Painkiller, where the single-player experience is king, and staying alive requires timing, weapon management, and quick reflexes. The story in these kind of games always took a back seat to the action, and that's no different here. In between levels, the player is presented with somewhat animated storyboards a la Max Payne, complete with fully voiced dialogue.
Check the nanomachines. When they are ready, we will assimilate them.
Done.
It's nothing amazing, but it works well enough. The nice thing about games like these, though, is that if you aren't feeling the story, you can just skip it altogether and not feel lost. In fact, you can probably make up your own story. Whatever motivates you to get through the levels is practically all that's needed. Visually, the game is outstanding. Flying Wild Hog presumably built the engine from the ground up over a 2-year period, and it's pretty clear they've done this before. Everything is very fluidly animated, especially the weapons. The lighting is some of the best I've seen this side of Dead Space 2 and Crysis 2, and honestly, I really like the art style. It's also well optimized, with me being able to max the game out completely and still retain a frame rate of 60 with dips when things got hectic. And physics! Lots of things fly around during explosions and whatnot, which is great. The atmosphere in this world they've created really feels authentic, with things like fake ads and rainfall helping sell it even further. I also particularly like the in-game store, which utilizes a system that Doom 3 introduced, where you simply walk up and actually use a monitor in the game without transitioning to an outside menu. The same goes for the game's door switches. I really love this kind of thing, and I wish it were done more often. Things aren't too bad on the audio side either, with very ambient music accompanying the game's quieter moments, and fast-paced techno replacing it during battles, not unlike how Painkiller swapped to metal during its shootouts. The only gripe I might have is the guns themselves, despite being massive and wonderful to shoot, aren't quite as hefty sounding as I'd like. When I'm firing a shotgun the size of a leg, I'd really like to feel it. The game does support 5.1 surround though, and I'd recommend you turn it up if you can. Of course, being pretty and sounding great are important aspects to any game, but the entire point of Hard Reset is to deliver a very specific type of gameplay experience. You have no teammates to bail you out, there are no QTEs, your health doesn't regenerate, and there is no cover system. It's you versus a horde of enemies whose AI is programmed to do one thing: tear you apart. Thus, the focus shifts to its mechanics. Fundamentally, the game is pretty sound. You have your standard mouse and keyboard controls, the game actually has full 360 controller support, and all the expected functionality is intact. Some complaints may arise, however. For example, there is no ability to crouch, and thus being able to find cover to allow your shields to recharge is rarely an option. This pretty much forces you to try to never get hit, which is fine, except your character's movement is rather slow. Unfortunately, too, a few enemies attack by charging at you, and since you're so slow, if you don't begin moving out of the way well in advance, you're going to get hit. You could end up spending more time using the game's limited sprint function to try for health packs than focusing on the core mechanic of shooting, which may annoy some. Also, while shooting enemies, there's no audible feedback to let you know you're actually hitting something. But on the left side, when an enemy dies, you will see a number appear showing the experience you got from that character. Just a heads up. Getting back to balance for a second, I feel like the few issues there are could largely be remedied with a faster run speed, but I can also honestly say that most deaths felt like my fault, and not the result of the game being cheap. It wouldn't hurt either if switching weapons were a little bit faster. The level design is interesting too, in that despite having the same aesthetic throughout, it actually feels like it changes things up quite a few times with a nice variation of tight corridors and wide open arenas. Not to mention boss battles, a very welcome addition in my book. Also of note, there is no quick save feature, so you initially are expected to rely on the developer's chosen checkpoints. But here's a trick to help you fix that if you wish. Press Ctrl-tilde, type bind F5 save in the console, and voila! F5 is now a quick save button, F9 to load. Lastly, I'd like to note that in the review copy I was given and the demo that was released, the opening menu has received some criticism for taking too long to navigate. Flying Wild Hog confirmed to me they will be releasing a patch with an option to speed up the menus, as well as the addition of an FOV slider to change your field of view. At around 5 hours, and I'm being generous, from beginning to end, Hard Reset is definitely not worth $60. It's lucky then that it's only $30, and despite that price, it still encourages multiple playthroughs with an unlockable EX mode that allows you to start over while retaining all of your upgrades, as well as leaderboards. Regardless though, I think it's a very impressive first effort, and another example of how digital distribution can help change gaming for the better. By allowing small developers to be much more flexible with their pricing structure, they should be well suited to compete head-to-head with larger publishers and have their game sell on its own merits rather than TV ads or artificial hype. Let the competition begin. B.